Welcome to the Manhattan Bridge. We out here today to take long exposure photos of the FDR. So today I'm gonna take you step by step as I take these photos and think out loud. But it's gonna be tricky because today's all about shutter speed. And ideally, I'd love to get like a long exposure from the bottom of the photo all the way to the top. That's gonna be tricky because that'll probably take like a 10-second exposure. But the problem is there's a lot of shaking with the train and cars. But hopefully, they say that carbon fiber tripods absorb vibration, so today we're gonna find out. But because of the vibration, I'm gonna probably have to crank up the ISO, and with all the rumbling going on, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to pull that off. But as I go along, I'll think out loud and show you the process. As for the camera gear, 5D Mark IV and the 35mm 1.4 by Sigma. The way I set up my camera is not the traditional way. I set it up so I have to manually choose my focus point, and this button over here, the AF on, all it does is focus, and the shutter button, all that does is take the photo, and it had nothing to do with focus. So I could recompose my camera, and I hit the shutter button, and it's not gonna refocus every time. So again, the shutter button is just for taking the shot, and this AF button is just for focusing. So when it comes to shooting long exposure photos, if your camera has vibration reduction or image stabilization, turn it off. This one doesn't. And as a precaution, I put a piece of paper, a receipt, just to prevent light leaks from the light over here and this light over here. Another tidbit of information, I put the camera strap over here just to avoid any waviness. Now, if I wanted to go crazy, I could put it into, what's that called? I could lock up the mirror to reduce shake, but normally that doesn't really make that big of a difference. All right, so whenever you're taking your photo, the lowest ISO possible, and in this case is 50. And at let's go F11. And 25 seconds, let's go a little bit under. Let's go 15 seconds. Now at 15 seconds, it should be able to get a streak from the bottom of the photo all the way to the top, but the question is vibration. So let's see if we get a sharp shot. That is pretty cool, but the key is we need 3 cars going both ways. Let's check the histogram. And we are good. No matter what, when it comes to photography, you'd rather underexpose and overexpose, because if you overexpose too much, you're not going to be able to bring back those detail in the bright parts of the image. So no matter what, that's a rule that you typically don't break unless you don't care about the bright parts of the images. All right, so right now everything looks pretty stable. I don't feel I feel a little bit of shake. So we'll see how these images hold up. Another quick tip I want to share with you guys is be sure to take a lot of photos. And in my case, as you can see here, I had to take a lot of photos because, as I mentioned earlier, I had a vision, and that was to get a photo of the light streaks coming from the bottom of the image all the way to the top. And the other reason I had to take a lot of photos was because I was on a very unstable ground. So in case you're wondering what my ratio was, 28 photos out of 53, so that's almost a 50-50 ratio. Now, out of all those images, I wasn't crazy about all of them. As you can see here, when it comes to shooting long exposures, it's also a timing issue. Sorry if you hear any snoring, that is my doggy. Actually, that one came out okay, but actually this one came out cool. So again, be sure to take lots of photos just to make sure you get the shot, and especially when things are unstable. Because when you're shooting long exposures, even like a little bit of vibration will cause a blurry image. Now let's zoom in. And it looks a little bit blurry. The telltale sign will be the bridge. And it looks a little bit blurry. So let's get a slower shutter speed at 15 seconds. Let's try 8 seconds. And we're super underexposed, so I'm gonna have to crank up the ISO to Let's go 400. So I'm gonna wait for the train to pass me by, and then I'm gonna hit the shutter. All right, 8 seconds, F11, ISO 400, so 8 seconds. Let's see if we get sharp photos. And in case you're curious, I put the focus point right where it says Brooklyn Manhattan Bridge. So that'll let me know if I got a sharp image. If I can read the sign in the photo, I know I got a sharp image. And I think that looks pretty sharp. Now let's check out the light trails. That looks pretty good, except this car over here on the right. So all I'm gonna do for my next trick is include more of the cars on the bottom. So I'm gonna recompose. Ideally, you don't wanna do this to your tripod because the lower the tripod is to the base, like you don't wanna extend this because it's less stable. But right now I have no choice. If I go too low, you're gonna get this part of the bridge. Let's see. Yep. So almost, it's like a hair bit blurry. All right, let's take one without. Now let's take a photo without the train going by, and let's see if that makes a difference. If at this point, the photos are still blurry, I'm gonna have to choose a faster shutter speed. Now let's see. Gonna zoom in. That looks okay. I can't really tell, because even when it looks sharp on the back of your screen, it may not be when you get home and look at it big. All right, let's choose a faster shutter speed. Let's go 5 seconds and see what happens. So if at 5 seconds, that Brooklyn Bridge highway sign is sharp, then I know 5 seconds is the key. Not bad. And what I do like about the photo is that it's still got some color in the sky, and then we got these streaks. So composition wise, we are looking good. All right, everybody, so the on-site tutorial, I'm gonna have to end it here because when you're shooting by yourself, you always gotta be aware of your surroundings because my buddy's left, and when you're out shooting, it's always gonna be aware of your surroundings. And right now, there is like nobody here. And unfortunately, New York City is turning into Chicago in terms of the crime rate. So I'm gonna have to be super aware now that I'm by myself. Although things may seem crazy, things are under control, but sometimes you can't tell people how governments are. They have to see it for themselves. And right now we got tyrant governors everywhere trying to force people to do things that are unconstitutional. That's a different story for another day. I'll bring it back in the studio. Right now, 5 seconds, F11, ISO 400. Looks like that is the exposure I'm gonna be rocking with. If it gets too wavy, I'm gonna have to choose a slower shutter speed, and we'll see what I get when I come home. All right, guys. If you'd like to download and edit this photo at home, read the info in the description below. Sign up for my free newsletter. I'll send you more tutorials like this and awesome photos that you could edit. But before I begin, I apologize in advance if you hear any snoring because I have my doggy, my French Bulldog Gizmo, sitting right by my feet under my desk. And if I don't film this now, I'll never be able to film this later because once he wakes up, it's playtime. So let's not waste any more time. And the first thing I'm gonna do is hit remove chromatic aberration and enable profile corrections. And for the profile, Adobe Landscape, and that is pretty good. So let's go over here and adjust the crop, and that looks pretty straight, although I may come back to it later. Actually, over here doesn't look too straight. I was looking at this line, so I'm gonna hit R and drag down. Again, sorry for the snoring. Now my other doggy is snoring. All right, hit enter. Now let's bring the exposure down a little bit, bring down the highlights, and now I'm gonna hit the shadow slider and open up the shadows. And I know I may be flying through this, but I'm gonna work on a free in-depth tutorial on Lightroom. But for now, some people just like seeing the edits, and if you know a little bit about Lightroom, at least you get to see my editing process. And if you're just starting out in Lightroom and you're not sure what a slider does, best tip I could give you is just to go crazy just to see what the sliders do. All right, now I'm gonna move the white point over until this triangle turns white, and I'm gonna do the same thing with the blacks. That way I know if I print this image, I'll have black and white, so that'll give me enough contrast. Now I'm looking at the shadow areas, and that's pretty good. Oh, and before I forget, always make sure that when you are editing, very important tip is make sure the brightness isn't all the way down or all the way up. I like to keep it somewhere like around there. So be sure that your screen isn't too bright or too dark, because that might throw things off, but that's why you always edit with the histogram. All right, let's move on. So the shadow areas are pretty good. Our shadows are gonna tweak a little bit. I got my white point, my black point. Let's add a little bit of clarity, maybe 3 to add some more crispiness, vibrance. I always like to pump that up to about here, and that is looking good. So now let's make the blue skies bluer, and I'm gonna click this target adjustment brush, click here, hold, and drag up. And as you can see, now we got more blue, and I'm really liking that. All right, now let's do something about the orange and yellowy cast. Let's pull down the orange and the yellow. Now just like thinking in my head, like I pulled it all the way down, and now we have like no yellow, so let's pull it up a little bit, and that is good. Let's add some magenta. I see some magenta purpley colors over here. And another tip I could share with you guys is don't go all the way crazy with the saturation slider, because if you do, you're gonna get like some weird color fringing going on. And you can see it like over here, it just starts to look funny. So let's pull that down. I think it was at 72, 70 something. All right, that looks pretty good. My crop, I could tweak it a little bit because this building doesn't look completely straight. All right, hit enter. Sharpening, and just gonna pull it up to about here. And I know I'm flying by, but again, I will release an in-depth tutorial, or at least a crash course tutorial on how to edit in Lightroom. And be sure to sign up for my newsletter. And that is about it, except let's add, wrong one, a vignette. I'm gonna go right here, and that looks good. Now I'm thinking over here, I got too much dead space. Is kind of boring and distracting because it's like this big white sign. So let's hit R and crop it in to about this building over here, and adjust the crop again. The crop tool is something I always like never happy with. Hit enter, and right here I'm just thinking if I'm gonna leave that. And one more thing that's bugging me, I'm gonna zoom in here, hit the Q button for the spot removal, or you could just go right here, and I'm just gonna drag paint over that, hit Q to get rid of it, and Z to zoom out. And just for fun, I'm gonna hit M to add a graduated filter. Uncheck show selected mask overlay and bring this down a bit. And I think that looks a lot better. And now I'm just looking at the overall crop. And I think I'm gonna crop a little bit more of that building right there. Oh, now that I'm looking at the Brooklyn Bridge, it's kind of dark here. So let's hit K for the local adjustment brush. And I am going to paint. Let's lower or make the brush smaller. I'm hitting left bracket, and I'm just gonna paint over the Brooklyn Bridge. Show selected mask overlay, and I'm just making sure I didn't paint outside of the column or whatever you call it. I'm gonna go to shadows, and voila, now it's bright. There's a bit, now it's brighter. Now there's a bit of a blue overcast or a color cast, and I'm just gonna go to saturation and pull it down. If I go all the way, actually that doesn't look half bad. So if I push that slider all the way to the left, it makes it black and white. And that is good enough. That looks natural. And actually somewhere around there. And I apologize for my doggy snoring. And that is it. So under snapshots, I'm gonna create another version of Mikey's edits. So this was a photo I edited originally before, and this is the one I just did with you guys now. And I'm not sure which one I prefer, but I'm gonna leave both of these. So when you import this file into Lightroom or Photoshop, you click on snapshots and it'll bring you right here. And actually, let me just reset it. And I'm gonna create another snapshot and call it raw file as shot. So when you import it, it should look like this. Have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out. Thanks again for your support, and be sure to sign up for my newsletter so you can get more raw files like this and more inspiration and tutorials. And sorry again about the snoring. I'm not sure if you hear them, but all right, guys, wherever you are, wherever you may be, thank you again for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode.